Hi. It's only been 2 weeks away and I turned 76 years of age. Let me tell you about myself. Let's go back to the real beginning. My grandfather was born in Broken Hill to an Irish immigrant who came out very late in the 1800s. And he, at 14 years of age, took his elder brother's name and joined the Australian AIF to go to Gallipoli. Well, luckily enough, poor old grandpa, he went to Egypt, got to Gallipoli, and suffered from appendicitis. So he never got to fight the war, and that's how lucky I am here still. The good thing is, Pops, we called him Popeye, and he was a lovely, delightful, typical Aussie bloke who loved Egypt so much, he stayed there for 40 years. And he married my grandmother, who was Romanian. She came over. We tried to find some background about Nana. Nana Rose Biniam Goldstein. There's a nice Irish name for you. She had a withered left arm, and I believe she went to Egypt from Romania to get something done about her arm, but nothing ever happened because for as long as I remember her, she had a withered left arm. And they lived in Cairo, and they lived very well. She was a very posh lady, my grandmother, although Pop didn't stay in the army all his life. He was more a public servant over there in Cairo. But they all spoke Egyptian. My grandmother spoke 9 languages. My mother was born in Cairo. My mother's sister and 2 brothers, all born in Cairo. And we lived a pretty smart, happy life for quite a long period of time. I was born in 1939. Dad came out in the Second World War in the British Army, and basically we sort of got together as a family there and started our lifestyle living in, I suppose you could say, in almost luxury, because although we lived in an apartment, we had 7 servants. I had a personal nanny. My brother had a personal nanny. We had 2 chefs to cook our meals. Mum used to go to the club every day at the Egyptian Sporting Club, Heliopolis Sporting Club, and she'd have her gin and tonics and sit around with all the girls and chat and do nothing all day long and live the lifestyle of a colonel in the British Army, of which Dad turned out to be. And Dad's lifestyle was magnificent. He had a car, a 1942 Hudson, which was a magnificent piece of material. It belonged to the army. Then he took it over to the United Nations, where he became the public relations officer for United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration in Cairo. And he did that for 2 or 3 years. Helped some of our family out, push plugs here and there, put stamps on passports and fix things up. Dad was a fantastic fellow. I don't know that he had a great education, but it was a good education, a good enough education to help me out every time I asked him a question about anything that I went through school with, whereas when my son wanted something about school, I had no idea what he wanted to know about. And that was the good thing about the background of Dad, knowing that when in 1947 there was a cholera epidemic coming through Egypt, and I can remember my mother always saying to me, "Don't tell anybody that we're Jewish," because my grandmother was Jewish. And because grandmother was Jewish, therefore my mother is Jewish, therefore I'm Jewish. That stops at this part of the family. But she'd keep on saying this, "Don't tell anybody we're Jewish." Didn't realise till I was about 18 years of age that the realisation of that was that if Hitler and he was fighting Egypt, and that's what Dad was fighting for the British Army in Egypt, to keep Hitler away from the Suez Canal. If he'd won, of course, we might have ended up in Auschwitz. There's strike 2. Yeah? It's the amazing thing that things like that happen, and you realise why we were told not to tell anybody we're Jewish. Today, proud to be Jewish. Wear my St. David's. Never been religious. Dad said it's a faith. You've got to believe. And if you believe, you believe. If you don't believe, you don't believe, and I don't believe. But for some reason or other, I wish my grandmother had taught me some of the traditions of the Jewish faith, because I think it's, I don't know, something special. It can bring a tear to your eye. Anyway, good lifestyle in Egypt. Everything was fantastic. I went to school there for a couple of years at the Heliopolis English School, Cairo. Nothing special happened in Cairo for my very early part of my life, but in 1947 there was a General Naguib was taking over. King Farouk was being ousted. The British Army weren't too welcome in Egypt, and my uncle was in the British Army still, though Dad had been seconded away to the United Nations. It was still sort of British there, get the hell out of here. So Dad, with a few smart passport stamps of the United Nations, got us all out, and we got on a boat and came back to my grandfather's homeland, and he picked on Broken Hill. Now, we'd originally apparently come out here to Australia when I was just 10 days old, and we came out to Australia. They looked around for work. There was nothing in 1939, so they went back to Egypt. In 36 that was. Then 1939, we came out again, no work available. Dad was called back for the Second World War, so the whole family toured back again. And we were moving in groups of 10 or 12 as a family. And we arrived back in Egypt in 1939, and in 47, war was over, everything get out, so we all came back to Australia. And in between that time, in 1939, my grandfather had bought a house at 77 David Terrace, Woodville Park, which he'd rented out in that period of time. We got back, and 7 families got to go and sit there at 77 David Terrace, Woodville Park. And we were a League of Nations. My uncle had married an Italian. My auntie had married a South African Air Force guy. And we came out as a family of five separate families, all speaking different languages, all knowing different languages, and we started a new lifestyle in Australia. They have never, ever seen an iron, I should say. They've never seen a cleaner. They've never done any cleaning, washing, anything like that in their lives. And the argument started of who was going to do the ironing and the washing. They didn't know what it was all about. And they were the days, no washing machines. We had a big copper out the back in the laundry, 2 cement sinks, the big wooden stick, the Bluo. Every sheet was white, and it went in through there, through the roller, and then out to there wasn't even a Hills hoist in those days, because you'd put it out on a big long piece of string that went from the backyard out into the middle of the backyard, and a stick in between. And if the stick ever fell over, well, see you later. All the sheets would drop into the mud, and gabunga, back into the laundry, start all over again. And the arguments were enormous. Dad was a very intelligent man, and he went to look for a job as soon as he got to Australia here. Like I said, he was a colonel of the British Army. And from what I understand, he was just too well educated for the positions he asked for. And he went to jobs like in John Martin's and Myers and places like that. So he went into a service station with his brother-in-law, who was the South African. They had a service station on the corner of Grange Road and Military Road. And it was an independent service station, COR, Plume, Golden Fleece, all the petrol pumps out the front. We had to pump them with a hand, load it up with petrol, then put it into the car. And it was one of those things where it was a hard job. And Dad didn't get on with his brother-in-law, so after a couple of years, he went into a newspaper round, that's right. And we had a newspaper round in the sort of the Findon area. Dad had a 1924 Capital Chev, no top over the top of it, a convertible, real old buggy it was. And the whole family, this is about 10 or 12 of us, every night as Dad would go to town, pick up the advertisers, he'd bring them all back into the living room. We'd have bicycle tyres, and we'd cut up the bicycle tyres to make rubber bands, roll up the newspapers, put the rubber bands over the top, and they were ready to be thrown out of the car. I mean, Dad sometimes had a bad shoulder, but business was business, and he had to go out. He was a tough bugger in those days. I'd give him 100% credit for what he did and kept us going in Australia here. The newspaper business, they didn't have the plastic wrap around them, and he had to get complaints every day in the winter time that the newspaper wasn't thrown properly into under the veranda and all things like that. He lasted about a couple of years with that. That drove him crazy, and he bought another service station down on the corner of Torrens Road and Wright Street at Croydon. That was an independent service station too. And it was just coming around 1953 when the big oil companies were buying service stations out. And Caltex approached him, and they bought the station for £12,500. £12,500 in 1953 was big time money. It was like winning the lottery. So Dad just said, "Oh, good, we'll go to Europe for 6 months." And he put his Hudson, the big car that he bought from Egypt, on board the SS Orion, my brother and I and Mum and Dad, and we went to Europe for 6 months. We toured from Southampton to London, all the way through Europe, right round through the Swiss Alps, in the days when the Swiss Alps had only one single highway going through it. Oh, that was crazy driving. And into Italy, and we ended up in Naples, where we caught the boat and went home. The best education that I think my brother and I have ever had in our lives to do that. And in the meantime, of course, when we first came out to Australia in 1947, my uncle, for some reason, had got into Prince Alfred College. So therefore, we had an inroad to there, and myself and my young brother were put into... No, he went to Croydon Primary School first, but I went straight into Princess at grade 3, and I got the razz of my lifetime there. The kids at school used to call me Sphinx, Farouk, black man, why was I white? I spoke with a terribly, terribly nice English accent, because that's how we spoke in the household at home. But Mum spoke 4 languages, Dad spoke 5, and we'd speak... I spoke 3, Italian, French, Arabic and English, because you had to do that to speak with the population and the shopkeepers in Egypt. So anyhow, I got into Prince Alfred College, started in grade 3, and I can remember the kids there in grade 7 calling me Farouk, and I hated it. I'd come home crying, didn't like the attitudes. But by the time I got to grade 7, and the grade 7ers were in leaving honours in those days, I was twice as big as them. And I never heard any problems after that from that time onwards. I had a great time at school. Prince Alfred College was a great time for me. I ended up being senior cadet under officer in the army parade, and also the captain of the school 8s. And to be captain of the school 8s at Prince Alfred College was something rather special. And I was able to stay at school until we got to the point of beating St Peter's College, which was the big time thing. To beat Saints was just the in thing. And I fell in love with a nurse, and she worked at the Royal Adelaide Hospital. She used to wear a beautiful red cape with a big white shawl over the top. It was a magnificent looking uniform. And she said to me one day while we were holding hands, because in my days, I was 18 years of age, still at school, wearing a school cap. And she said, "This is not convention for me, a working girl, to be going out with a schoolboy." And I got embarrassed, and I asked Dad, "Can I leave school?" And he agreed with that, and got me a job at the Olympic Tyre Company on Anzac Highway as a desk clerk. The most boring bloody job on earth. And I lasted there for about 3 months. And the good thing is that Dad had helped me to buy brand new Morris Minor 1000 as my first car. And I parked out the front every day religiously. Lunchtime, went out with the paper bag and a Coca-Cola, had my lunch, and Barry Hall was on 5DN. And I listened to music, and he said one day, would somebody out there like to be a paddle operator with a chance of becoming an announcer? And I went, wow, that's my job. And I went home, and I still wasn't keen about writing letters, and Dad helped me write a letter to the general manager of 5DN, who, we found out, was an ex-Prince Alfred Old Collegian. So to the interview, I went with my Prince Alfred College Old Collegian's badge on my top up here, my Old Collegian's school tie. And instead of having the general conversation with the general manager of, hello, young man, where do you think your life's going to be in 10 years' time and what would you like to do? We talked about school because, you know, he wasn't that much older than me. And he had been a Princess with masters who had taught him as much as they taught me. And I think that was a great thing of being able to get me a job because there were 150 applicants for that job. And I got it, and I became a paddle operator, 1957, just before rock and roll started in Australia. And in between this time, the first couple of months at school, National Service turned up, and I was called up for that, and I was given leave for 3 months to go to Woodside to do my National Service up there, and that was a full-time 3 months National Service where they promised to give you a job back, and the National Service was fantastic. Wouldn't want to do it again, but it was probably one of the greatest learning devices in my life. It was just fantastic. And luckily enough there again, I was a pretty efficient soldier, and I became the commanding officer of the National Service parade that ended that particular sequence of May of 1958. Wonderful. National Service. Recommend it to anybody. I can just imagine people wanting to go and do National Service today. They wouldn't want to be involved in it. So while at 5DN, I was given the job of saying, you're going to be a disc jockey. And I thought, what's a disc jockey? Because we'd never heard of that. My music that I was playing was Andre Kostelanetz, Paddy Page, music like that. And I was reading a little bit of news, doing a part-time sport program, bringing some guys in from the racing field. And then they said, oh, Coca-Cola came to me, that's right, and asked me if I'd like to be the president of their Hi-Fi Club, which was a worldwide teenage organisation. And they would buy a half hour of rock and roll music per week on 5DN and call it the Hi-Fi Club. Well, that again, you know, right place, right time, bingo. I was there as the first disc jockey in South Australia playing the top records of the week, getting imported records sent over. Nobody in Adelaide was getting imported records. We, you know, the Hi-Fi Club would send them over directly from America with the big round hole in the middle instead of the small hole. And that was fun. 1961 came around, and John Fowler, who was manager of 5AD, and that was the top station in town, because in those days there were 3 radio stations, 5DN, 5KA and 5AD, the commercial stations. And in the ratings, if each one got 33%, they were good. So each one got 33, but one got 33.2, one got 33.3. And at the time, I think 5AD were getting 33.3, and they were number 1 station. And he asked me, would I come and join them? And the headline on the advertiser was, Ace Disc Jockey joins 5AD. Well, that was the beginning of a career that I've spent 57 years doing, and I've loved every moment of it. Let's start there. 1961, I went to 5AD, and John Fowler said, you'll be doing 4:30 till 8 every afternoon. So 4:30 till 6. An hour and a half on the air, just playing records. It sounded like a dream job. And I said, well, what about Coca-Cola? And he said, what about them? I said, well, they buy half an hour a week, 2.5 hours a week on 5DN. Would you buy them over here? Because Coca-Cola, they were about to pay me £9 a week at 5AD. Coca-Cola were paying me 17 guineas a week. That's £17, 17 shillings, just to do their two hi-fi programs. And he said, oh, I can't afford to bring you over for that. So I went to Coca-Cola and I said, would you come over to 580 if I'd moved over? They said, of course. So bingo, there I was, all set up again, with this time making £1 more per week. And with the 17 guineas a week that I was getting from Coca-Cola, it was just top-line money. In between time, I'd been with the Princeton Club, which we started as a dance club back in, so far long ago, 1961. Ron Tremaine said, you want to come and compare? And this was a dance club. It was like the beginning of discos. No booze, only Coca-Cola. Dance clubs started at 8 o'clock, finished at 11:30, and everybody was home by midnight. We'd have midnight dances on a Sunday night when it was holiday on Monday, because you weren't allowed to have a dance on a Sunday night. The things have changed so much over the years. It's hard to remember that they were just damn good years. We came up through, I'm very happy though, came up through a fantastic era of music, of job availability, of friends, of no drugs. Anybody who says to me, you couldn't have lived if you remember the 1960s, that's bullshit. Everybody said that to me. I have never, ever in my life seen anybody come to me and offer me anything from marijuana to any drug whatsoever. Maybe because I've never been involved with those sort of people, but the dances we were at, we had a bit of booze, and the dances that we started with, the Princeton Club and places like that, we had Coca-Cola, and maybe if we had a bottle of Bacardi out the back, we'd slip a little bit of Bacardi into the bottle of Coke, and that'd make me merry for the rest of the night. It was fantastic. And, nobody got pie-eyed or anything. It was just get you nice and merry. And the other thing was getting involved in the clubs and places like that, was being able to get out amongst teenagers and do so many things that involve. Harry M. Miller was the promoter of all the big shows that came to Australia, and he was a lovely man. He bought every act you could possibly think of, and he paid me £10 cash to compare the first show that he bought out here. And I went, wow, £10, that was more than I was making in a week. And with every show that came out, he gave me the job. £10 cash. I compared the Rolling Stones, Roy Orbison, the Beach Boys, Tom Jones. Every time a show came out, he'd just give me a call and say, you want to do it? Bingo. We'd go to a party with the boys beforehand. We'd be part of the whole... No drugs again. And everybody talking about drugs about that scene. I just don't remember that at all. And then, of course, in 1964, the time came when the Beatles were coming to Australia, and I went on air and said, the Beatles are coming to Australia, but they're not coming to Adelaide. For some reason, it's because maybe we don't have a large enough hall, or it's not enough big enough venue to bring them over here, or we're just a backwater. So I said, all we need is maybe perhaps a few signatures, and if I could send those signatures to Ken Brodziak, maybe he might change his mind and bring them over here. And from just that single bit of talking like that on the air one afternoon, it got the town going so crazy that I was having children ringing me up from all over schools, everywhere. Can we get autographs for you? Can we get signatures for you? People running up and down Rundle Street, walking into big stores, getting toilet rolls and having toilet rolls filled up with signatures to get as many as they could. Within 3 weeks, I had 80,000 signatures in the foyer at 5. And 80,000 signatures. It's a lot of signatures, believe me. And for some reason or other, sent that over to Melbourne with my friend Ron Tremaine from the Princeton Club again, who had the right behind him with John Martins, who wanted the Beatles to come so much that they gave him $3,000, said, pay what you like to get the Beatles to come to Adelaide. And we sent it all over. I got the telegram back saying, Beatles now appearing Centennial Hall, 12th and 13th June 1964. 2 days later, Beatles now not appearing due to exorbitant prices charged by the Royal Agricultural and Horticultural Society. And I went on there and said, listen, ring the RAHS, the Royal Society, the Royal Showgrounds, and tell them what you think about the prices they're charging for the Beatles. Well, they went crazy. And in those days, the Royal Agricultural and Horticultural Society was up there in the levels of Bank of Adelaide, Advertiser, top-line companies. The chairman of the Advertiser called me into his office, because we were owned by the Advertiser in those days, and said, did you say something about Mr. Sedgman at the Royal Adelaide? I said, yes, sir, it was about the Beatles. He said, you shouldn't have done that, old boy, but I can understand why you did it. But I was admonished for making those comments on the air. But Rod Tremaine went to Melbourne, bought them for £3,000. Things changed around. John Martins got right behind it, and it was the biggest publicity. I mean, nobody in public relations, in the job of going, I think I'll try and organise something to get 300,000 people out, could ever organise anything like this. And I couldn't tell you in sequence of why the biggest crowd that's ever been out on the streets to welcome any artist in Australia turned out for that day on the 12th of June. 300,000 people queued 10 people thick from the opening of the military road gates of the Adelaide Airport all the way down Anzac Highway, all the way down West Terrace, North Terrace, into King William Street. And King William Street was just one big mass of people. They came down there in an open deck car. I'd flown in with the Beatles from Sydney and gone ahead of them and got to the Adelaide Town Hall so that I could greet them on the Town Hall balcony. Well, they came in, and nobody in the next 3 days was allowed anywhere near the Beatles except moi. I had, because John Martins and everybody put the money towards it, and I'd done so much to get them there, that not any disc jockey from anywhere in Australia, and they travelled all around the world to get interviews, were allowed anywhere near the Beatles. And I have just one story I can remember about the Beatles. There were 4 concerts. The back room where they sat was just a dirty, filthy little old stinking room in comparison to most of the big artists that come out these days. They just had lights around the window and the mirror, and the mirror was all broken. Young girl who'd been trying to get to me to get an autograph for months. And I said, I can't get you the autograph, nothing. The night of one of the shows, knock on the door, opened the door, and there was a young girl dressed in a black outfit with a white penny and a white crown in her hair. That's how the South Australian Hotel servants worked, and how they dressed during the time at the South Australian Hotel where they stayed. And she said, coffee for the Beatles? And she had a tray with coffee, and I said, you smart cookie. And she came in, luckily, she got the autographs, she got a hug from each of them, and she was wrapped out of her mind. And I've never seen anything like that happen again before and since, but it was just magnificent. The shows that came to Australia here were fabulous, and people, I think I've had some good respect from the audiences, where if I'd walk out on stage and say, hey, quiet folks, we need a little quiet here, everybody'd go quiet. And they'd say, scream for me. And they'd scream and go out of their brains. It's a good feeling. If anybody's ever been out on stage and had applause, believe me, the zing that it gives you is just quite amazing. And what would it be like to be in some of the big halls of the United States where 60,000 people are applauding? It would be just fantastic. We were at breakfast one night with the Beach Boys. The whole family was there, the 4 boys in the band, and their father And while we're sitting there having breakfast, we had a whole bunch of kids who'd won a contest to be at breakfast. Brian Wilson was on the piano playing a 12-bar blues. It was just down, 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 down. And it went on for about half an hour. And I said to the father, Mr. Wilson, can't you get him to shut up for a while? He's making a noise. He said, be quiet, Robert. That guy might be writing us another million seller up on the stage. And it's just little things like that that come around when you meet people. And everyone I've ever met in the main has been terrific. We were married in my first marriage in 1961. I was 22 years of age. And I met Anne, my first wife, one night at a Bucks party. A couple of guys said, what are you doing tonight? And I said, nothing much. So they said, well, grab half a dozen bottles of beer and we'll go to this Bucks party and we'll maybe get to meet somebody. So we went to Woodford up in the hills and took out a half dozen bottles. We got there, and while the other guys went in, I found out it was a hen's night, not a Bucks night. And I didn't know the people whose house it was. Eventually it was Anne's house. And she came out about 10 minutes later and said, come inside. And I said, no, I'm embarrassed because I don't like the idea of coming to somebody's house that I don't know. That was me at 22 years of age. Today, I'd walk into anybody's house. So from that night, we started going out together. She was gorgeous. She was a model at David Jones. And in those days, modelling at David Jones was the in thing to be. If you're a model, you were a model at David Jones. Photographic model, the whole lot. With Anne, we had Mark first. Mark was my eldest son. He was born in 1963, and then in 1968, Rebecca was born. They've been two fabulous kids. I was lucky enough to, in those days, to put them through Prince Alfred College and St Peter's College, because in those days you didn't have to, the school fees were taxable, tax deductions, and that made it easier for anybody to send your kid to college. And I went to Prince's, so that's what it was all about. They did pretty well at school, but it was before Rebecca left school. She was about 17. I went to Juliana's, was my play club every night of the week in the Hilton Hotel in the ground floor area there. It was the best discotheque you've ever seen. And used to drink my bottle of J&B Scotch, which was provided me free of charge by the Hilton Hotel because I was a star. And I met Carmel, saw her there just dancing in the crowd, and she just struck me. She turned me right on, and I took her home that night. And I just fell madly in love, and I just went back about a week later, because Anne had a feeling that I wasn't really madly in love with her at that particular time. I told her doctor she should go out and have an affair because we weren't working together. So I went and stayed at Carmel's place, then told Anna I was moving out of the house. I went to the house one day and took the baby grand piano and the mini pool table, and that's all I took out of the house. I moved that into the new house in North Adelaide, and I moved in with Carmel. We were married then for about 5 or 6 years. It's hard to remember years that you were married in, but it was a lovely house in North Adelaide. The original house I bought was the one in Calaroga Street, Wattle Park. That cost me $11,500. $11,500, I'm sorry. But then I moved in with Carmel, gave Anne the whole house, but I kept the superannuation, which wasn't much in those days. And that was, she didn't take it too well, and sorry, bad luck, that was it. We were married. I was married to Carmel for good 5 or 6 years, maybe a little bit longer than that. We used to fight, and yell and shout and scream at each other. Each woman I've ever met have been different in their personalities. And one night, she said she was moving out, and I came home one night and all the furniture had gone. So I guess that was meant that she'd gone. And we even till today still speak and are friendly to each other, and it's quite nice. I then met my French wife. Yes, that was, and her name was, and I'll never forget, what's her name? Stephanie. We were at luncheon on King William Road, and Annie Wills came in with Stephanie, and this tall, voluptuous French with a French accent, which knocked me right out. Fell in love with her straight away. Hello, my name is Stephanie. And that's how she introduced herself. And from then on, we went out, we lived together. She came and lived with me, and we got married. We got married in the casino, in the rich men's room. I believe no one's ever been married there since. No one was ever married there before. But it was a beautiful room. I had Dennis Sheridan and a quartet, and the atmosphere there was just fantastic. Married her for about 2 years. And by the way, all between these wives, I went to America and Europe with my first wife. I went to Hawaii and America with my second wife, with the French wife. We went to France and spent 3 weeks across France driving. It was just absolutely wonderful. But she was a gambler. And I knew she liked gambling, but not as much as one day she said, I'm going for a walk. And the next day, she hadn't been home. I knew where she was. And my mother was living with me at the time. And I said, I think I'll just go and check her out. I went to the casino. There was Stephanie in the same clothes that she left at 3 o'clock the previous afternoon. She'd been gambling all night. Now, she did have her own money, and I don't know whether she wanted her money or lost my money or what. It wasn't a massive amount of money, but there was no way in the world that I was going to be married to somebody who gambled to that extent. Because even when we went to Europe, anywhere we went, to Paris, to Switzerland, if there was a casino, she wanted to go there. So one night I told her, after I'd picked her up from the casino, I said, you pack your bags. This is exactly how I said it. You pack your bags and piss off. And she said, you cannot need to piss off. And I said, you want to bet? And that was the last I saw of her as a wife. She disappeared. She went to work in a boutique here in Adelaide, and since then I believe she's gone back to France to live. Her brother, by the way, was a Benedictine monk, and it was fascinating. We went to his abbey in the south of France, and it was a magnificent place out on an island in a big building on top of a hill, and the clanging chains and noises. Spent the night there at the abbey. He was absolute drunk. He took us to a sort of let's go and have a drink somewhere. Went to one of these wineries, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, Stephanie and he, totally drunk, and I had to drive them home. And I'm in the middle of France, and I've got no idea where to go. Well, after about 4 or 5 hours, we found our way home. But he was a delightful guy, couldn't speak a word of English. Her mother couldn't speak a word of English. My French was so broken I couldn't understand a word of French. And I lasted 2 weeks living in that house in the freezing cold in a place called Hôpital-sur-Mer in the south of France. It might have been beautiful in summertime, but it was shit in wintertime. And that was, well, when she left, when I said, pack your bags and piss off, she said, you can attend me that. I said, well, yes, I can. And off she went. and she disappeared. And there was a break there for quite some time. I wasn't looking for anybody. One night at the Red Legs discotheque, there was a night when everybody was remembering the old days, and we went back there, and this stunning-looking 5'9" came out, and I said, "Where have you been all my life?" Typical pushy line, and there in that line was Pamela, who I'd never seen before. She was just a sales rep in town. In fact, she worked at the Hyatt Hotel in selling those special card memberships to get a sort of a cheap luncheon voucher. And she was gorgeous. I mean, I ran after her for about 2 weeks, and after that, it wasn't long after, whereas all our marriages were pretty slop up things, very well done, and we married at the registry office. And Pamela was gorgeous. She was a very intelligent lady. She wrote a couple of speeches for me, one which I made outside Parliament House, and it knocked out everybody out. It was my good reading of it and her good writing of it that made it fantastic. She one night said to my boss, "I like what he does," pointing to me. And the boss said, "Well, why don't you give it a try?" And she went and tried, and she became the afternoon radio announcer at 5AA, and she did it fantastically well. I think, yeah, she was intelligent. She knew what to put together as a program. She never killed the ratings, but never died in the ratings, and did extremely well. And then I met the love of my life, who is just the most beautiful, gorgeous, yummy, and I know she's listening. But we were at Chibo's one afternoon on King William Road, and I was there with Glenn Todman, my best man at the wedding, and he said, "There's a lady inside just wants to come out and say hello." No, that's right, she didn't know I was there. She just wants to come outside and join us. And I said, "Fine, fantastic." Well, he went back inside and told her to come out, and there came this beautiful, gorgeous, blonde, yummo, and I just looked at her and I couldn't believe what I'd just met. And that afternoon I said to Glenn, "Can I get a number?" He said, she might want to give you a number. I said, "Well, just ask her for the telephone number." And I got the telephone number and I rang her. It was a Tuesday afternoon, I think. I said, "Could we have dinner on Saturday night?" And she said, "Yes, that'd be lovely." Well, I couldn't wait till Saturday night. And I had breakfast with her on Wednesday morning, Thursday morning, dinner on Thursday, Friday night, and Saturday night. We had about 10 dinners before we got to meet each other on the actual Saturday night. And it was only 3 months, and we were married. Where were we married? We were married in a beautiful ceremony we were married at Carrick Hill, and it was just a beautiful wedding, and it was lovely. And we've been married since, and happily ever after. It's been beautiful. Let me get back to radio. 1967. I've always happened to be in radio at the right time, at the right place, to get the right job that was available. I mean, 1957, I started in radio. Disc jockeys began. I was the first disc jockey. I played rock and roll for the first time ever on Adelaide radio. And then in 1967, after I'd gone from DN to DN to AD to AA, in 67, my boss said to me I was a bit old for doing rock and roll, and in came the right to do talkback, which gave us a 7-second delay, and nobody was ever allowed to talk as a two-way conversation on radio prior to that. And that was Magic Land. It was the Vietnam War, and I was very much the right-winger who went all for the Vietnam War. And somebody sent me a white feather in the mail. that meaning, yes, I can talk about it, but I'd be too scared to go there. And luckily, Ron Collins, who was our promotions manager, was right on the dot. He went and got me a full accreditation by the American Army, the Australian Army, and the Vietnamese Army. And I was fully accredited war correspondent to go to Vietnam. I spent 2 weeks over there. Magnificent. It's just, what an experience to go to Vietnam, to have the ability with that pass in my hand to get onto any aircraft that I wanted to out of Ton Son Airport in Saigon and fly anywhere in Vietnam. The airport was just it was the busiest airport in the world, and it was just masses of planes moving back and forward. The helicopter trips I had through there were wonderful. One day, one guy came to me and said, "You want to go on a Choi Hoi flight?" And I said, "What's that?" He said, "Well, come with me." So we got in this little Bell helicopter, a little round bubble in the front, and he was a captain, and I walked around everywhere with an army uniform on, and he put 2 speakers on the bottom of the helicopter, and off we went. And we were travelling across the jungle, and he switched the speakers on, and it was all in Vietnamese, and they're going, I said, "What are you doing?" He said, we're just telling the Viet Cong who are down there in the trees to let themselves go, come out, put their hands up, put the white flag up, and come into our side. And I said, "So what? The Viet Cong are all hanging around underneath us, 20 yards away." He said, "Yeah." I said, what was it? They shoot at us. He said, "Oh, we do it's a special type of cutaway." Anyway, I said, "What the hell is that?" And the chopper went straight up in the air, turned around, and flew back down that way. It was just, my guts was everywhere. But hell, it was exciting to know that the Viet Cong were 10 yards away, and we'd been through the whole lot. He said, "Oh, you do that every day. Sometimes you get shot at, sometimes you don't." It's quite amazing. The Americans over there showed me what the Yanks are really like in wartime. They do what they're like when they feel like it. They smoke cigars, they smoke marijuana, they have loud playing music on their big box transistor radios, whereas the Aussies are constantly well-dressed, always have the discipline of calling their senior officers by the name of Sir, whereas the Americans, "Hello, Jack, hello, Bill." And it was such a diverse way of thinking of what we had about those troops, but a fabulous experience. Of course, even better than doing national service. That was Talkback, and a fascinating era for myself in radio. And then, of course, after that was the end of my career at 5AD. They made me manager of the station, and I expected to be general manager. For some reason, they didn't give me the job, so I told them to go and stick it up their ass, because they wanted me to go back and be a sales rep downstairs in the advertisers. There's no way in the world. And I didn't have a job for 2 weeks. First time in my life, no job. And the manager of 5AA came and offered me a job for the same money I was making then. I was making $30,000 a year. It was shit money, but I'd be making so much in expense accounts that, as I said, I'd had a helicopter to use at any time when I was at 5AD, and that was a big drag down. But I went in the mornings to do morning programs at 5AA. Vincent Smith got sacked from 5DN, and I was relegated into the nighttime program while he went and came and did the morning program. And I thought, oh, that was the end. Where the hell am I going doing nighttime? Then nighttime talkback started. It was a different thing to what talkback had been at nighttime. And I was given the okay to say and do what I wanted to do. And that's history, because the ratings over the period of time that I did talkback were number one. and I had the best time of my life in in doing as I wished at night time on 5AA. It was just fantastic. And that lasted for quite a few years, well, until my retirement. I got to the point where I felt like saying, well, that's it, I've done enough, I've been there. And a lot of people said, you really want to give it up? And I say, yes, I do. And I haven't gone back on anything that I've ever said I'd do. I just retired, finished off gracefully, said goodbye to everybody, and I haven't missed one bloody bit of being on radio after being there 57 years. There was a hell of a lot to tell in the story of 57 years, and probably some of the things have been missed out, but I think I've told most of the stuff that is important, especially for my kids and grandkids and great-great-great-great-grandkids. I wonder what that'll be like. What will this film look like in the year 2050? Unbelievable. Thank you. I've written something down because I really don't know that I could say anything off the cuff because I just fall apart, I think. It's about it for me. After 57 years in radio, I'm done. I'm now nearly 75 years old, and really there is nothing more for me to do. I've had a wonderful career. There are no regrets. Sure, there might have been some times and some things that I would have done differently, but then it wouldn't have been me. But I reckon I've picked the right time to say goodbye. I've been in this industry now for nearly 6 decades. When I started, television and portable radios didn't even exist. Public radio was turned off at midnight, and mobile phones had not been invented. But during the years and years in the entertainment industry, I was in the right place at the right time. And in many ways, I was lucky, and I can look back at my career and be pretty proud of it. Sure, some people will be pleased I'm gone, because I can be loud and abusive, angry even, and there have been many times when I've opened my mouth and my foot has fallen out. I've often been told my mouth is so big I could whisper in my own ear. But I've paid my price when I've overstepped the mark, and I've been punished by the courts. But, getting into hot water has never bothered me, really. At least it keeps you clean. But it could be if I could be a little bit immodest for a moment, I figure I must have done good sometimes. I was reflecting on my career just a few days ago with some friends and was reminded I was the first to introduce talk radio to Australia, and so helped create an entire new career for many people in radio, in particular South Australia. I was given full and official war correspondent status by the Australian, American and Vietnam government, won a television Logie, was inducted into the Australian Radio Hall of Fame, and was awarded an Order of Australia medal by the government. And of course, I've hosted the #1 nighttime, here we go, the nighttime radio show for the past 200 years. Somebody asked me recently, how come you've survived so long in a notoriously fickle industry? And I reckon it's because I'm being honest with people, brutally at times, and it's got me into some trouble. Some people mightn't believe this, but I would rather dance with life than wrestle with it. But sometimes you have to, be you and tell people to stop the bullshit. Not that retiring from public life will change that very much, and I suppose it's my use of insensitive, politically incorrect language that upsets some people, but I sometimes wonder what language the truck drivers are using now that everyone is using theirs and mine. So that's it, folks. Now, most of my life belongs in the past, and it's time for me to say and to live the rest of my life with my beautiful wife, Ada. Good night, South Australia, and thanks for listening. Just before I go, I don't know that I could leave any special message without crying my eyes out, because my kids have been absolutely fantastic in my lifetime. They've done extremely well. Mark doesn't have kids in America, but he controls a lot of radio stations in New York, and he got that, hopefully he remembers, by my introduction to him and a few people in the American radio industry. But he's done well, and I think that's fantastic. You're great, mate. One thing I want to say about him, he came out of doing a 3-year course at the School of Food and Catering, and he was a hotel manager. And he came out, he said, "I'm a hotel manager." And I said, "No, you're not. You're a shit kicker until now you've learnt how to become a hotel manager." He didn't like that very much. That's what made him go to America and try his attempt at being in radio. But he's done well, and I love you, mate. My daughter, she's just the most gorgeous, loveliest, warmest, nicest person you can meet. She's certainly a little bit different to me. She can break down in a second, whereas I suppose I can too. But she's done very well. She's come across a problem now with her mate who has got cancer, and we don't know what's going to happen in the future. But here it is, it's 2015, and Steve's still pretty good. Good luck to both of you, darlings. I hope life is just great for you. Finally, and I'm sure this is going to be the final one, because after 5 wives, there can be no more wives than the one I have right now. She is, I think anybody else, any one of the other 5 wives would have walked away from me 3 years ago. But she is so helpful, so nice, so warm, so loving, and I'm sure she's the best wife I'll ever have. Love you, darling.
Every evening at 8, you can hear him arrive. He stands 6 feet tall, weighs 285. Big Bob. Big Bob. Big Bad Bob.
$13.95, Adelaide's 5AA, with Bob Francis.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the entertainment capital of talkback radio in the world.